The courthouse in Franklin County stood like a monument to judgment, its gray stone walls streaked with rain, its marble floors echoing with every hesitant footstep. Inside, Courtroom B was already filled to capacity long before the judge entered. The smell of coffee and nervous sweat hung in the air. Every seat was taken. Every breath felt borrowed. At the defense table sat Ethan Cole, a 35-year-old construction worker with rough hands and eyes that looked older than his years. He wore the same gray suit he'd worn at every hearing, one that didn't quite fit him, borrowed from a friend at the job site before he lost it all. Across from him, the prosecutor's table gleamed with confidence. Polished shoes, crisp files, and a calm certainty that the system would deliver its version of justice. The case was simple on paper. A late-night hit-and-run outside a suburban neighborhood. A mother struck while crossing the street, left bleeding on the pavement. The only witness was a neighbor who'd seen a dark pickup speed away. No license plate, no camera footage, just a few tire marks and a set of footprints that vanished near the corner. But the police had something stronger than human memory. A K-9 named Rex. Ethan sat perfectly still as the bailiff called the court to order. His lawyer, Carla Jennings, leaned close, whispering, "Just breathe. Don't react to anything. Let me handle it." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. She'd been fighting uphill since day one. The prosecution had the community's sympathy and a decorated police officer with a heroic dog. What did the defense have? A man with calloused hands and a story no one wanted to believe. The judge entered, his robe flowing like a dark wave. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the collective scraping of chairs filled the chamber. When everyone sat, the tension didn't ease, it settled, heavy and suffocating. In the second row sat an older woman clutching a small child on her lap. The girl, no older than 3, had her mother's curls and her father's curiosity. Her name was Lily. She swung her legs restlessly, her patent leather shoes tapping against the wooden bench. Her grandmother whispered for her to sit still, but the child's wide eyes moved from face to face, the judge, the lawyers, and finally, the large German shepherd lying at the foot of the prosecutor's table. The dog was magnificent, muscular, alert, his golden fur glinting under the fluorescent lights. His handler, Officer Thomas Marlowe, sat beside him, occasionally reaching down to pat his head. The jurors smiled faintly at the sight. The animal's calm presence made the grim case feel almost noble. Rex wasn't just evidence, he was a hero, the face of faith in law enforcement. Carla glanced at the jury box, reading their expressions. Admiration. Trust. She knew the odds. People believed dogs. People believed uniforms. And in a town that still hadn't recovered from the accident that injured a local mother, they needed someone to blame. Ethan had become that someone. The prosecutor rose, buttoning his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began smoothly, "today you will see how justice prevails, not through words or speculation, but through evidence. Clear scientific evidence gathered by one of the finest K-9 units in the state." He gestured toward Rex, who lifted his head as if on cue. "This is Rex. He's served in 27 operations, from missing persons to homicide investigations. And in every case, his nose has never failed." The jurors leaned forward. Carla scribbled something on her legal pad. "Emotion appeal," she wrote, underlining it twice. The prosecutor continued, painting a vivid picture of the night in question. "It was raining," he said, pacing before the jury. Visibility was low. But Rex tracked the scent from the crash site across 2 streets, through a parking lot, straight to the stairwell of Ethan Cole's apartment building. Not a single deviation. He turned dramatically toward Ethan. That's where he found him. That's where guilt found him. All eyes moved to Ethan. He swallowed hard, resisting the urge to speak. His lawyer had warned him. Silence was his only ally in a room already decided against him. The judge nodded. "Prosecution, you may call your first witness." Officer Marlowe stood. His uniform gleamed with medals. His voice was steady, practiced. "Rex has been my partner for 5 years," he said proudly. "He's never once identified the wrong suspect." He explained the science of scent detection, the way a dog's nose could distinguish a human's unique chemical signature from thousands of others. Every sentence seemed to hammer another nail into Ethan's fate. Then came the demonstration. At the prosecution's request, Rex was led to the center of the courtroom. A small container was placed on the floor, a piece of Ethan's clothing, sealed in evidence plastic. Rex sniffed, then barked once, trotting confidently toward Ethan's table. The jury smiled. It was a show of certainty, of truth delivered by man's best friend. In the back row, Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Doggy," she whispered excitedly, tugging her grandmother's sleeve. "That's the doggy." Her grandmother shushed her, embarrassed, but the girl kept watching, eyes shining with recognition. On the stand, Officer Marlowe described how Rex had followed the scent trail that night, how his barking had guided them right to Ethan's door. Carla cross-examined, trying to probe inconsistencies. Were there other residents in that building? She asked. 26, Marlowe replied. Did Rex check all their doors? No, ma'am. He led us directly to apartment 3B. And did you verify that the scent at the crash site was uncontaminated? We followed all standard protocols, he said flatly. Carla pressed harder. You didn't answer the question, officer. Was the scent cross-checked? Marlowe hesitated. No, ma'am. It wasn't necessary. Carla sat down slowly, the weight of futility pressing on her shoulders. She could sense the jurors' impatience. In their eyes, she wasn't defending an innocent man, she was attacking a hero dog. Ethan exhaled, staring down at his trembling hands. He thought of his daughter, of how she'd ask when he was coming home. Soon, he'd said, though he hadn't believed it. Now, looking around the courtroom, soon felt like a word from another life. The prosecutor smiled confidently. No further questions, he said. The judge nodded. We'll recess for lunch. Court resumes at 2. As people began to stand, Carla leaned close to Ethan. We'll figure something out, she whispered, though even she didn't know what that meant anymore. The courtroom slowly emptied. The jurors filed out. Reporters gathered their things. Only a few spectators remained, including Lily and her grandmother. The little girl leaned forward, chin on the wooden barrier, watching as Officer Marlowe led Rex toward the exit. The dog glanced back, his dark eyes meeting hers for a brief second. Doggy, she whispered again, this time louder. The officer paused, half turning. She likes him, the grandmother said apologetically. She's never seen a police dog before. But Lily shook her head. No, she said firmly, her small voice echoing faintly in the nearly empty courtroom. That's the doggy from our house. Her grandmother frowned. What do you mean, sweetheart? The one who came in our yard, Lily said matter-of-factly. Before Mommy got hurt. The officer's hand froze on Rex's leash. Carla, who had been gathering her notes, looked up sharply. Excuse me, what did she just say? Lily turned, her curls bouncing. He was there. He had the same collar. He came to play. The room seemed to still. Even the ceiling fan's hum faded beneath the weight of those innocent words. Officer Marlowe's expression changed, just slightly, but enough for Carla to notice. Ethan looked over, confusion turning slowly to realization. His lawyer's mind began racing. If the dog had been near the victim's house before the accident, his scent recognition could have been contaminated. The entire foundation of the case, The evidence everyone believed unshakable suddenly looked fragile. Carla's pulse quickened. "Mrs. Adams," she said gently to the grandmother, "when you say the dog was at your house, how sure are you?" The grandmother hesitated. "Well, the neighbor mentioned seeing some police dogs training nearby a few days before the accident. I didn't think anything of it." Officer Marlowe cleared his throat. "That's irrelevant," he said stiffly. "Training exercises happen all the time." But Carla didn't look convinced. She glanced at Ethan, his first glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. Then back to the little girl, whose innocent honesty had sliced through the courtroom's carefully constructed certainty. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows, glinting off the courtroom floor. And in that fleeting silence, a truth hung in the air, small, fragile, and impossible to ignore. The next session, everyone knew, would not be the same. X. The courtroom was different the next morning. Reporters had multiplied overnight, their cameras perched outside the courthouse like vultures waiting for a story to fall apart. The headline on every local channel buzzed with speculation. Child claims police dog at center of trial, visited victim's home before incident. Inside, Ethan Cole sat at the defense table again. But this time, there was a flicker of something new in his posture, faint and trembling, but alive. His lawyer, Carla Jennings, hadn't slept. The moment Lily's words echoed in her head, she'd gone straight to her office, digging through police records until sunrise. Something in the timeline didn't add up. Now, as the bailiff called the court to order, Carla's heart thudded in her chest. The judge, weary-eyed but composed, looked over his glasses. "Ms. Jennings, I understand you've requested a review of the canine evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor," Carla said, standing. Her voice was steady, but carried an undercurrent of determination. "After testimony yesterday, new information has come to light, information that calls into question the reliability of Officer Marlowe's scent identification." The prosecutor, Jonathan Crane, immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a distraction based on a child's misunderstanding, a 3-year-old's imagination." But the judge raised his hand. "Let's hear her out." Carla nodded in thanks. She stepped toward the center of the courtroom. "Yesterday, a child in this very room, Lily Adams, daughter of the victim, recognized Officer Marlowe's canine partner, Rex. She stated that she'd seen him days before the crash in her yard. That statement prompted me to request the dog's housing and training records for the week leading up to the incident." She turned to the evidence monitor. With a click, the screen came alive. According to these records, Officer Marlowe's unit conducted training exercises less than 3 blocks from the victim's residence on 3 separate occasions, within 5 days prior to the hit and run. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's eyes widened. The jurors exchanged glances. The prosecutor's confident posture stiffened. "Now," Carla continued, her tone measured but forceful, "this means Rex could have encountered the scent of multiple residents in that neighborhood, including Mr. Cole, long before the night of the incident. The supposed match the prosecution depends on could have been a false positive." Crane stood. "This is conjecture," he snapped. "There's no proof the dog interacted with the defendant before the crime." Carla turned toward him, calm but sharp. "Then let's ask the man who was holding the leash." All eyes shifted to Officer Marlowe. He sat stone-faced, jaw tight. The judge gestured. "Officer, please return to the stand." Marlowe walked up slowly, his uniform crisp, his confidence cracked. When he sat, Carla approached him like a surgeon approaching a wound. "Officer," she began, "were you or your unit conducting training near the Adams residence in the week before the hit and run?" Marlowe cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Routine training." Standard area searches. And during those exercises, was Rex off leash at any point? A pause. Briefly, yes. He's allowed to roam within perimeter limits. Carla nodded. And were those perimeters close enough for him to enter private yards? Marlowe hesitated, just long enough for the silence to become incriminating. It's possible. Carla turned to the jury, her voice rising slightly. Possible. That means the dog could have encountered human scents, including my client's, without any relation to the alleged crime. Yet this dog's identification is the sole evidence connecting Ethan Cole to that night. The room hummed with tension. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, his pen frozen mid-note. Crane jumped in again, desperate to regain control. Even if that were true, it doesn't negate the fact that Rex followed a continuous trail from the scene to the defendant's building. That's empirical. Carla smiled faintly. Empirical? Or convenient? She walked to the screen again and clicked to the next Imager GPS map. This data, pulled from Officer Marlowe's cruiser, shows his route during that search. The log indicates a stop for nearly 20 minutes at a location inconsistent with his original report. Right here, she pointed, at the Adams property. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Marlowe's face went pale. That's a data error, he stammered. Is it? Carla pressed. Because the timestamp places you there, the same day neighbors saw police dogs in the yard. So, officer, were you there with Rex? I was, he admitted finally, for a training debrief. But that has nothing to do with the case. Carla's tone sharpened. Except it does. Because the dog that tracked my client wasn't identifying a new scent, it was following one it already knew. The room erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order! Ethan could hardly breathe. For the first time, the truth felt close enough to touch. Carla looked back at Marlowe. Tell me, officer, did you disclose this prior contact with the scene in your initial report? Marlowe's jaw clenched. No, it wasn't relevant. Not relevant. Carla repeated, stepping closer. You omitted the fact that your canine had been in the victim's neighborhood days before the incident. You called that not relevant? That's called contamination, officer. The prosecutor objected loudly. Speculative. The judge frowned. Overruled. Answer the question. Marlowe's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't think it mattered. Carla's tone softened, but carried more weight than before. It always matters when a man's life is at stake. The silence that followed was suffocating. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. Ethan's hands trembled on the table, his lawyer's words slicing through months of despair. The judge finally spoke. We'll adjourn for today. Both parties will review the new evidence and will reconvene tomorrow morning. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder. Outside, the courthouse steps became a media frenzy. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded faces. Ms. Jennings, do you believe the officer falsified his report? One reporter shouted. Carla didn't stop walking. I believe the truth has a way of barking when it's been muzzled long enough, she said, sliding into her car. Ethan followed, head spinning. Do you really think this can clear me? He asked quietly. Carla looked at him through the rearview mirror. I don't think, she said. I know. That little girl may have just saved your life. As they drove off, she glanced out the window at the courthouse, where Officer Marlowe stood alone on the steps, reporters closing in. His eyes darted nervously. He was no longer the calm, confident handler from the day before. He looked like a man cornered by his own leash. That night, rain fell again, tapping against Ethan's cell window like an impatient visitor. He couldn't sleep. Images replayed in his mind, the flash of headlights, the sound of distant sirens, the weight of accusations that had nearly crushed him. Somewhere across town, a little girl slept soundly, unaware that her words had cracked open a fortress of lies. Marlowe, meanwhile, sat in his car outside the police station, drenched in guilt and rain. He stared at his phone, thumb hovering over a number he didn't dare call. Inside, Rex lay curled in his cage, whining softly. For the first time, Marlowe didn't know if his partner was his salvation or his downfall. He remembered the moment he changed that report, the moment he convinced himself it was harmless. "The guy fits the profile," his sergeant had said. "You want to make captain someday, right? Just tidy up the paperwork." And he had, until a child saw what no one else could. The next morning, the world outside the courthouse felt electric. Reporters lined the steps. The public wanted a scandal. They could smell it. Inside, the judge's chambers buzzed with urgency. Carla arrived early, files under her arm, exhaustion carved into her face, but purpose burning in her eyes. Across the room, Crane argued heatedly with Marlowe, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. "Do you realize what you've done?" Crane hissed. "You just handed the defense a mistrial." Marlowe's reply was barely a whisper. "I didn't think it'd matter." "Yeah, well, it does now," Crane snapped, slamming a folder shut. "And if that dog's record gets questioned, this department burns with it." At that moment, Carla entered, her presence cutting the air in two. "Gentlemen," she said evenly, "are we ready to begin?" No one answered. As the courtroom filled again, the judge adjusted his glasses and sighed. "It appears," he said quietly, "that what began as a straightforward criminal trial is now a question of integrity." The audience fell silent. Lily was there again, perched on her grandmother's lap, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed animal. When Rex was brought into the room, she waved. The dog tilted his head, tail still. The judge turned to Marlowe. "Officer, I expect full disclosure tomorrow. Every record, every log, every location your K9 visited that week. Do you understand?" Marlowe nodded weakly. "Yes, Your Honor." The gavel struck again. Ethan looked toward Lily, this child he'd never met, who had unknowingly changed his fate. She smiled, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. And for the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to believe that the truth might finally find its way home. The courthouse was buzzing long before dawn. By 7 a.m., camera crews lined the steps, their lenses glinting under the gray Ohio sky. Reporters rehearsed sound bites while coffee steamed in their hands. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the little girl who had shaken an entire criminal trial with a single sentence. Inside, the corridors hummed with whispers. Lawyers hurried past, clutching files. The smell of floor polish and tension lingered. Courtroom B, where everything had changed, was now a battlefield waiting for round 3. Ethan Cole arrived flanked by deputies, head bowed, his wrists trembling slightly against the cool steel of his handcuffs. But something in his face had changed resolve, had replaced resignation. When he looked up and saw his lawyer, Carla Jennings, waiting by the defense table, he managed the faintest nod. Carla, sleepless and sharp, looked over the crowd. She could feel the air thick with curiosity and doubt. Yesterday, she'd cracked the first layer of the prosecution's armor. Today, she needed to break it wide open. The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise." The room rose like a single organism. Judge Myers entered, his expression a careful mask of neutrality. But his eyes, weary and cautious, betrayed that he knew this case had crossed into something bigger than a trial. It was becoming a reckoning. "Court is now in session," he said. "Before we proceed, I remind everyone that this remains a court of law, not a spectacle. Keep order, or I will clear the gallery." Silence fell. Carla stood. "Your Honor, the defense requests permission to call an additional witness." The prosecutor, Jonathan Crane didn't wait a beat. Objection, Your Honor. We have no notice of any new witness. The witness is the child who identified the police dog, Carla said calmly. Lily Adams. Her statement is central to establishing potential contamination of evidence. Crane's jaw tightened. This is absurd. You want to put a toddler on the stand? She saw something no one else did, Carla replied. And I believe her words hold the truth your office overlooked. Judge Myers leaned back, considering. Mr. Crane, the court has already admitted new evidence based on this child's statement. It seems only fair we hear her account directly. Crane scowled. Then I want her questioned in chambers, away from the jury. Carla shook her head. Transparency, Your Honor. The jury deserves to see her honesty firsthand. The judge sighed. Very well. Proceed with caution. Gasps murmured through the courtroom as the bailiff opened the side door. Lily entered, holding her grandmother's hand. She wore a yellow dress with a little bow at the collar, her hair in messy curls. In her arms, she clutched a stuffed bunny, its ear missing. The sight of her softened even the hardest expressions in the room. Carla knelt to her level. Hi, Lily, she said gently. Do you remember me? Lily nodded shyly. You talk a lot, she said, earning a quiet laugh from the gallery. That's right, Carla smiled. I do. But today, I want to hear you talk. Do you know why you're here? To tell the truth, Lily said confidently, glancing at her grandmother. Grandma said that's what big people do in court. The judge hid a smile behind his hand. She's not wrong, he murmured. Carla continued softly. Lily, do you see that dog over there? Rex sat near the witness stand, his handler at his side. The German shepherd's head lifted, ears pricking. Yes, Lily said brightly. That's the doggy from Mommy's yard. A low ripple passed through the courtroom. Carla's tone remained calm. Can you tell us what you remember? Lily frowned, thinking hard. He came with a man. The man had a shiny badge. Mommy said not to go near, but the doggy sniffed my ball. He wagged his tail. Then they left. When was this, sweetie? Before Mommy got hurt. It was sunny that day. Carla nodded. Thank you, Lily. That's very brave. Crane stood, buttoning his jacket, his voice dripping condescension. Lily, are you sure it was this dog? There are lots of dogs that look alike, aren't there? Lily looked at him curiously. No, his collar says Rex. Marlo's head jerked up. Carla's gaze sharpened. The jury leaned forward. Crane stammered. You saw his collar? Yes, Lily said. It was shiny and had letters. Mommy read them. The prosecutor swallowed hard. No further questions. Carla smiled gently. Thank you, Lily. You can go sit with your grandma now. The child waved to Rex as she left. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor before going still. A moment the door closed behind her, chaos erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Whispers grew louder until the judge's gavel cracked the air. Order, he shouted. Miss Jennings, proceed. Carla turned toward the stand. Your Honor, in light of this child's testimony and the newly uncovered GPS logs, I request that all scent evidence gathered by Officer Marlo and Canine Rex be ruled inadmissible. Crane slammed his hand on the table. Your Honor, this is unprecedented. We can't let a 3-year-old story dismantle a decade of procedural reliability. But the judge looked thoughtful. Reliability is built on transparency, Mr. Crane, and I'm not convinced we've had much of that so far. He turned to Marlo, who was sweating beneath the lights. Officer, when you testified, you said Rex's tracking was continuous and uncontaminated. Were you aware your canine had entered the victim's property days prior? Marlo hesitated. Yes, sir. And you didn't disclose that? No, sir. Why not? Marlowe's voice cracked. Because I didn't want it to cast doubt on the search. The judge's face hardened. So you concealed information that could have affected the integrity of evidence. Marlowe didn't respond. Carla's voice was low but deadly. Your Honor, I believe the officer's omission was deliberate. I request the court subpoena all communication between Officer Marlowe and the investigative team. Crane jumped to his feet again. Objection, this is a smear campaign. But the judge didn't even look at him. Overruled. Subpoena granted. The courtroom exploded again. The sound of the gavel barely contained the storm. That afternoon, as proceedings paused, Carla sat alone in the defense lounge, staring at her reflection in the vending machine's glass. She could feel victory close, but it came with a heavy weight. Ethan entered quietly. You think they'll drop the charges? Carla shook her head. Not yet. Crane won't surrender. But Marlowe's cracking. Once we get those messages, we'll know if he doctored his report. Ethan's voice trembled. Why would someone do that? Why frame me? She sighed. Because sometimes the system would rather be right than be honest. He stared at the floor. That little girl? She doesn't even know me, but she believed what she saw. Carla smiled softly. Kids don't overthink the truth. They just say it. Back in the courtroom, Crane was unraveling. He cornered Marlowe in the hallway, his voice sharp with anger. You had one job, Tom. One damn job to bring me clean evidence. Now we've got a media circus and a defense attorney making us look corrupt. Marlowe's face was pale. I didn't lie, I just omitted details. Which is the same as lying under oath, Crane hissed. Do you have any idea what happens if that gets out? Marlowe didn't answer. But deep down, he knew it was already too late. When the court reconvened, Carla presented her final argument of the day. Her words were calm, deliberate, cinematic in their rhythm. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, turning to the jury, this case was built on faith in a dog, in a badge, in a system we want to believe never fails. But faith isn't fact. The only person who spoke the truth here was a child, because she had nothing to gain and nothing to hide. She saw what none of us did, and that truth unraveled everything else. She paused, letting the silence breathe. Ethan Cole isn't a criminal. He's a man caught in the gears of a system that forgot to ask whether its evidence could be wrong. That dog isn't a villain. He's just proof that even the most loyal servant can be led astray by human hands. When she finished, the courtroom was still. Even Crane, for once, didn't interrupt. The judge finally spoke. We'll adjourn for the day. The court will review all newly submitted materials. Session resumes tomorrow morning. As people began to rise, Carla looked over at Lily and her grandmother. The little girl was humming softly, swinging her legs. Innocent, unaware of the empire she'd just toppled. Ethan turned to his lawyer, voice barely a whisper. What happens next? Carla watched Marlowe walk out of the room, shoulders heavy, reporters swarming him like locusts. Next, she said quietly, the truth starts chasing back. Outside, the sun finally broke through the gray clouds, flooding the courthouse steps in golden light, a rare, fleeting moment of clarity in a case built on shadows. Morning arrived cloaked in drizzle, the kind that made the courthouse steps slick and gray. Reporters were already in position, umbrellas bobbing like dark flowers. The previous day's revelation, the child identifying the police dog, had exploded across every major network. Headlines screamed of misconduct, corruption, and betrayal in the justice system. By the time Carla Jennings stepped out of her car, she could feel the weight of the nation pressing against those courthouse doors. Her phone had rung nonstop since dawn. News outlets, advocacy groups, even an ethics committee representative asking for details. but her focus stayed razor-sharp. Today, she wasn't just defending Ethan Cole. She was pulling at the hidden wires of the system that nearly destroyed him. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The jury looked different, now more alert, cautious. The prosecution's table seemed less confident, their files stacked like fragile shields. Officer Tom Marlowe sat stiffly behind Jonathan Crane, eyes bloodshot, hands restless. His badge gleamed under the lights, but it looked more like a burden than an honor. Judge Myers entered, his expression grave. "Let's proceed," he said simply. "Ms. Jennings, I believe the subpoenaed communications have arrived?" Carla rose. "Yes, Your Honor. Submitted into evidence this morning emails, message logs, and internal memos between Officer Marlowe, the forensic team, and the district attorney's office." Crane's tone cut like a blade. "Your Honor, this is a gross invasion of privacy. These communications are irrelevant to the facts of the case." Myers fixed him with a cool stare. "If they bear on the integrity of the investigation, they are most certainly relevant. Proceed, Ms. Jennings." Carla nodded, moving toward the projector. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the first email flickered onto the screen. To Dad Jonathan Crane, from Officer Tom Marlowe, subject, dog unit contamination. Sir, Rex was previously deployed at the victim's residence for a neighborhood safety check. He may have residual scent association. Please advise if we should report this in the chain of custody. Gasps rippled through the audience. Carla didn't look away from the screen. "Mr. Crane," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "Did you receive this email?" Crane's jaw tightened. "I don't recall." Carla tapped the next slide. "The timestamp says you replied 12 minutes later." To Officer Marlowe, from Jonathan Crane, subject, dog unit contamination. No need to complicate things. The defense won't trace the dog's prior route. Proceed with confidence." The room went dead silent. Crane's face turned the color of ash. "That message taken out of context?" "Context?" Carla interrupted, her tone rising. "You told a police officer to suppress critical information that could alter the outcome of a trial. You knowingly allowed false evidence to be presented to this court." The judge's gavel thundered. "Order." But it was too late. The gallery erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Jurors exchanged shocked looks, and even the bailiff stood frozen. Myers turned on Crane, his voice trembling with anger. "Mr. Crane, this borders on criminal misconduct. You will remain silent until I decide whether to hold you in contempt." Crane sank into his chair, the life drained from his face. Carla turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I move to have all charges against Ethan Cole dismissed with prejudice. The foundation of this case, its evidence, its investigation, was corrupted by deliberate deception." The judge rubbed his temples. "We'll recess for 30 minutes while I review this." Outside, the rain had stopped, but thunder still rumbled in the distance. Carla stepped onto the courthouse steps, taking a slow breath. Reporters immediately surrounded her, microphones thrust forward. "Ms. Jennings, did you expect this level of corruption? Do you think Day Crane will face criminal charges? Is your client innocent?" Carla held up a hand. "I can't comment on pending proceedings. But I can say this. Today isn't about one man's freedom. It's about accountability. And sometimes it takes a child's truth to make adults see the lies they built." As she turned to head back inside, she saw them, Lily and her grandmother, standing quietly under the courthouse awning. The little girl waved shyly. Carla smiled, her heart softening. "Hey, brave girl," she said, kneeling. "How are you holding up?" Lily shrugged. "Everyone's mad." Carla nodded. "Sometimes people get mad when they realize they were wrong." "Did I do something bad?" Lily whispered. Carla shook her head gently. You did something good. You told the truth. That's the most powerful thing anyone can do. Lily smiled faintly. Mommy always said doggies can't lie. Carla laughed softly. She was right. Back inside, the courtroom reconvened. Crane sat hunched, whispering urgently with his assistant. Marlowe stared blankly ahead, his career unraveling in slow motion. When the judge entered again, everyone rose, the air thick with anticipation. Be seated, Myers said. After reviewing the submitted communications and cross-referencing the chain of custody records, this court finds significant procedural misconduct. Crane swallowed hard. Therefore, the judge continued, the prosecution's evidence, including all K-9 tracking results and scent identifications, is deemed inadmissible. Furthermore, I am ordering an internal review of the DA's office and law enforcement conduct in this case. Gasps echoed again. Carla stood slowly. And what of my client, Your Honor? Myers looked down from the bench, his voice heavy but resolute. Given the tainted nature of the evidence, the court has no choice but to dismiss all charges against Ethan Cole, effective immediately. The room erupted applause, shouts, disbelief. Ethan sat frozen, his hands trembling as the weight of months in captivity suddenly lifted. Carla turned to him, smiling through tears. It's over, she whispered. He covered his face, shaking, and when he finally looked up, his eyes glistened. I don't even know how to thank you. Live your life, she said softly. That's thanks enough. As the gavel struck one last time, the courtroom dissolved into chaos. Reporters surged forward. Marlowe stood, his badge glinting one final time before he unclipped it and laid it gently on the table. Then he walked out, shoulders bowed under invisible weight. Crane remained seated, staring into nothing. The mighty prosecutor, undone not by a rival, but by his own arrogance and a little girl's memory. Judge Myers watched him for a moment before muttering, God help us all, and retreating to chambers. Later that afternoon, outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. The rain had stopped completely, replaced by golden sunlight. Carla and Ethan stood together as the crowd thinned. Where will you go? She asked. Home, he said. If I still have one. She nodded. You will. Time fixes more than people think. He looked at her with quiet gratitude. You ever get tired of fighting? Carla smiled faintly. Only when it stops mattering. And it still matters. From across the plaza, Lily's laughter rang out high, clear, unburdened. She was feeding pigeons crumbs from her snack, the birds flapping wildly around her. Ethan watched her, expression softening. That kid saved my life, he murmured. She reminded us what truth sounds like, Carla replied. Simple, honest, unafraid. But even as they stood in the sunlight, a shadow loomed over the courthouse. Inside, federal agents were already collecting evidence from Crane's office. Boxes of documents, hard drives, and sealed envelopes filled the hallways. The corruption ran deeper than anyone imagined. Judge Myers watched from his window, the city's skyline glinting in the distance. It's never just one case, he muttered. It's the whole damn system. He turned away, closing the blinds. Outside, the world moved on unaware that in one small Ohio courtroom, the foundations of trust had just been shaken to their core. That night, as news channels replayed the footage of the verdict, a single image went viral. Little Lily pointing at the police dog, her eyes wide and innocent. The caption read, Sometimes the truth barks louder than the lies. And across America, people watched, listened, and wondered how many other truths had gone unheard. For Carla Jennings, that question would become her next battle. But for now, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. In her quiet apartment, she turned off the television. leaned back in her chair, and whispered into the silence. One voice. One truth. That's all it takes. The city outside hummed with life again, as if the world, for one fleeting moment, had remembered what justice was meant to feel like. The storm that had gathered over the small Ohio courthouse didn't end with the verdict. It only changed shape. By dawn the next day, the media had declared it the case that shook the badge. Every channel ran the same image of Ethan Cole hugging his lawyer, with the caption, "Justice or Scandal?" In living rooms, bars, and police precincts across the country, people argued. Some saw Ethan as a symbol of redemption, proof that truth could still pierce the system's armor. Others saw chaos, a dangerous precedent that questioned the integrity of law enforcement. For Carla Jennings, the quiet after the storm felt like standing on a battlefield, surrounded by smoke and echoes. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters wanted interviews. Activist groups wanted her to speak at rallies. A documentary filmmaker left 3 messages in a row. But beneath the noise was something heavier. The awareness that what she'd uncovered wasn't just one man's misconduct. It was the tip of an iceberg. In the gray light of morning, she sat in her office, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled suit, coffee gone cold beside her. Case files littered her desk like fallen leaves. Ethan had been released less than 12 hours ago, but already she was sifting through the ashes of victory. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Ethan. He looked different shaven, dressed in borrowed clothes, but his eyes still carried the hollow look of a man who'd spent months behind bars for something he didn't do. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Carla gestured to a chair. "Of course." He sat, glancing at the piles of paper. "You're still working?" She smiled faintly. "The system doesn't fix itself overnight." Ethan exhaled. "I saw the news. They're saying Crane might be indicted." Carla nodded. Federal investigators moved in last night. Marlowe's cooperating, and the department's scrambling to contain the fallout. "It's going to get ugly." Ethan stared at the floor. "Good, it should." Carla studied him. "You know, most people in your position would start over somewhere new." "I thought about it," he said. "But I can't pretend none of this happened. I lost everything, my business, my friends, my reputation. People still think I did it. The internet doesn't forget." "No," Carla said softly. "It doesn't." He looked up, eyes raw. "So what do I do now?" She leaned back, choosing her words carefully. "You live. You rebuild. And when you're ready, you help others who've been where you were. Because there are more Ethans out there, waiting for someone to believe them." Ethan nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what I'll do." Across town, the fallout had already begun. At the precinct, Officer Tom Marlowe sat in an interrogation room, stripped of his badge and gun. His hands trembled as he signed the last page of his official confession. "I didn't want to lie," he murmured. "I just thought it would make the case easier. Crane said it wouldn't matter. Said the guy was guilty anyway." The investigator across the table said nothing, just slid the paper into a folder. When Marlowe finally looked up, his voice cracked. "You think they'll forgive me?" The investigator met his eyes. "That's not my call. But the public won't forget." Marlowe nodded, defeated. "Maybe that's fair." Meanwhile, the district attorney's office was in chaos. Crane's resignation hit the news before lunch. Cameras swarmed the front steps as he walked out, escorted by federal agents. His face, once confident and polished, was pale and hollow. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Crane, do you have any comment on the corruption allegations?" He stopped, straightened his tie, and looked directly into the nearest camera. "I did what I thought was necessary to protect justice," he said, his voice trembling. "Maybe justice didn't agree." And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. That night, Carla appeared on 60 Minutes. The host leaned forward, her tone measured but curious. "Ms. Jennings, you just won one of the most controversial cases in recent memory. What does this verdict mean for you personally?" Carla hesitated, glancing at the camera. "It means the truth still matters," she said. "But it also means we've built a system that punishes honesty when it's inconvenient. A child had to remind us of that." The host smiled slightly. "Do you think this case will change anything?" "I think it already has," Carla said. "The question is, will we learn from it, or bury it like all the others?" By the end of the week, the story had gone viral. Protesters marched outside police stations demanding transparency. Editorials called for reform. In Cleveland, a mural appeared overnight, Lily Adams, painted larger than life, pointing toward a police dog beside the words, "Truth doesn't wear a badge." Carla saw it on her drive home one evening and had to pull over. For a long moment, she just stared. The little girl's face bright, innocent, unafraid, felt like a reminder and a warning. 2 days later, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Jennings?" A woman's voice asked. "This is Catherine Adams, Lily's mother." Carla's heart lifted. "Oh, Mrs. Adams, I'm so glad to hear from you. How's Lily?" "She's fine. She keeps asking if the doggie's okay," Catherine said softly. She saw the mural. "I think she's proud." Carla smiled. "She should be. She changed lives." There was a pause. "I wanted to thank you," Catherine said, "for listening to her when others didn't, for protecting the truth." Carla's voice softened. "It was her courage that saved Ethan, not mine." Another pause. Then, quietly, "You sound tired." Carla laughed softly. "Maybe a little." "Well," Catherine said, "if you ever need reminding why you do what you do, come by. Lily's been drawing pictures of you. She says you're her superhero." Carla blinked back unexpected tears. "Tell her superheroes need naps sometimes." Catherine chuckled. "I'll tell her." But not everyone celebrated the verdict. In the shadows of the internet, hate forums festered. Anonymous posts called Carla a traitor to law enforcement. Her office received threats, phone calls, emails, even a brick through the window one night. The police offered extra patrols. She declined. "I'll take fear over silence," she told them. Still, she slept lightly, a baseball bat by the bed. Truth, she realized, always came with a cost. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to rebuild. He moved back into his small house on the outskirts of town, overgrown grass and peeling paint greeting him like ghosts. The first night, he couldn't sleep. The silence felt too heavy after months of metal bars and fluorescent lights. He found his old guitar in the closet, dusty and missing a string. He strummed it softly, the sound thin and fragile. But it was real. Outside, dawn crept across the sky, painting the horizon in pale pink. He closed his eyes and whispered to the quiet, "I'm still here." By the end of the month, Carla stood before a congressional panel in Washington. They had summoned her to testify about evidence handling and prosecutorial ethics. Cameras flashed. Politicians postured. But when it was her turn to speak, she didn't flinch. "Justice," she said, "isn't about winning cases. It's about telling the truth, even when it hurts." What happened in Ohio was not a mistake, it was a choice. And we must decide whether to keep making that choice. Her voice echoed in the chamber, clear and steady. When she finished, even her critics applauded. That night, back home, she received an email from Ethan. "Carla, I just wanted to say thank you again. I saw Lily and her mom today. She gave me a drawing, me, her, and Rex. She said the doggie's not bad, just confused. I think she's right." Carla smiled, closing her laptop. For the first time in months, she felt the world quiet down. Outside her window, the city lights flickered like tiny embers against the dark. Somewhere, a siren wailed, distant and lonely. She leaned back in her chair and whispered almost to herself, "Justice doesn't sleep, but maybe it dreams." And as the night deepened, the echoes of a child's truth still lingered, reminding her, and everyone who listened, that even the smallest voice could change the loudest lie. Winter crept into Ohio like a quiet thief, frosting the courthouse steps and turning the city into a blur of gray and white. Months had passed since the trial ended, but the shockwaves still hadn't faded. Across the nation, the case had ignited a storm. Think pieces, investigations, talk shows debating justice and corruption. Carla Jennings found herself at the center of it all, whether she wanted it or not. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Grocery stores, airports, cafes. Strangers would stop her to shake her hand, thank her for standing up to the system. But for every admirer, there was a shadow. Anonymous letters slid under her office door. Emails filled with threats. One night, she came home to find her car windshield smashed, a single note taped to the glass. "Stop digging." She stared at it for a long time before calling the police. When the officer arrived, he looked tired, detached. "Probably some crank, Miss Jennings. You've been on TV. People get crazy ideas." Carla folded her arms. "You don't think it's connected?" He shrugged. "Hard to say. You're not exactly popular with everyone in law enforcement right now." She met his gaze, steady and cold. "I didn't become a lawyer to be popular." Meanwhile, Ethan Cole was learning to live again. His name had been cleared, but the scars remained. He'd found work at a local shelter, helping men recently released from prison adjust to freedom. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was teaching others how to breathe again when he still struggled to sleep through the night. One evening, as he was locking up, a black SUV pulled to the curb. Two men stepped out, both in suits, both too calm. "Mr. Cole?" one asked. Ethan tensed. "Who's asking?" "Special Agent Rivera, Department of Justice." "This is Agent Kim. We'd like to talk about the Cole case off the record." Ethan's stomach turned. "I already told the truth. What more do you want?" Rivera exchanged a look with his partner. "We're investigating broader misconduct within the district attorney's office. It seems Crane's actions weren't isolated. We think he was part of something bigger: evidence manipulation, forced confessions, falsified reports. And your case might help expose it." Ethan's breath caught. "You mean there are others?" Rivera nodded grimly. "Dozens. Maybe more." Ethan thought of the nights in his cell, the hopeless faces of men who swore they were innocent. Maybe they weren't all lying. "I'll help," he said quietly. "But only if Carla's involved." Rivera smiled faintly. "Already on our list?" The next morning, Carla's office phone rang before sunrise. "This is Jennings." "Ms. Jennings, it's Agent Rivera, DOJ. We'd like to meet confidentially." "About Crane?" "About what Crane was covering for." Her pulse quickened. "How deep does it go?" Rivera's voice dropped. "Deep enough that you'll want a good lawyer yourself before this is over." By noon, Carla was sitting in a sleek government conference room in Cleveland. Rivera and Kim slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were photographs, transcripts, and redacted memos. "Crane's files led us here," Rivera explained. "Turns out, several high-profile convictions over the last decade relied on evidence gathered by the same canine unit and the same forensic analyst, both now under scrutiny. We believe there's been a pattern of planted evidence and falsified scent trails." Carla flipped through the pages. Names, faces, mugshots, people she'd never met, but who now felt achingly familiar. God, she whispered. How many? At least 12 confirmed cases, Kim said. Maybe more once we dig deeper. Carla sat back, mind spinning. The trial that freed Ethan hadn't just cracked the system. It had blown a hole through it. Rivera leaned forward. We want you to join our task force. You've seen firsthand how they operate. You can help us build the case. Carla hesitated. If I do this, I'll be painting a target on my back. Rivera nodded. You already have one. That night, snow fell hard, blanketing the city in silence. Carla sat by her window, the folder open on her lap. She felt the familiar burn of exhaustion, mixed with purpose. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Ethan, got a visit from the DOJ. I told them I'd help if you did. You in? She smiled faintly, typing back. Carla, always. Truth doesn't end with one case. Days turned into weeks. Together, they began piecing through years of buried evidence. Marlowe, stripped of his badge and desperate for redemption, agreed to cooperate. He confessed to doctored reports, falsified scent trails, and quiet pressure from superiors to close cases fast. During one interview, he sat across from Carla, eyes red. You think I wanted to ruin people's lives? Crane said it was just bending the rules. Said everyone did it? Carla's voice was low. And you believed him? I wanted to, he said. Because believing him was easier than believing I'd become the villain. Carla didn't answer. She'd seen too many good people justify the worst things. One afternoon, while reviewing old case files, Carla found something that made her stomach drop, a name she hadn't expected. Catherine Adams, Lily's mother. The report was from years earlier. An arrest for trespassing and obstruction of justice. Charges dropped after lack of evidence. But attached was a memo, unsigned, suggesting her arrest had been used to intimidate her into silence during a police misconduct complaint. Carla's heart pounded. She called Catherine immediately. Hey, it's Carla. I need to ask you something about an old case. But Catherine's voice on the other end trembled. You shouldn't be calling me. They're watching again. What do you mean, watching? I've seen cars outside, unmarked, the same faces. They're not done with you, Carla, or with us. The line went dead. The next morning, Carla's office was broken into. Files scattered, drawers pried open. Nothing stolen, at least nothing obvious. But the message was clear. She called Rivera. They know we're getting close. Good, he said simply. That means they're scared. Days later, a congressional hearing was announced, a formal inquiry into statewide prosecutorial misconduct. Carla was called to testify again, this time alongside Agent Rivera. But she wasn't the only witness. Tom Marlowe had agreed to go public. The hearing was televised live. As Marlowe took the stand, the camera zoomed in on his trembling hands. I swore to uphold the law, he said, voice cracking. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what that meant. I followed orders that destroyed lives. And for that, I am sorry. The nation watched in stunned silence. Then Carla spoke. Justice, she said, cannot survive secrecy. When the truth becomes inconvenient, the system learns to bury it. But truth has a way of clawing back through the dirt. Her words echoed across every screen. After the hearing, Carla walked alone through the snow-dusted Capitol steps. Reporters shouted questions, but she didn't answer. She spotted Rivera standing by a black car, watching her. You did good today, he said. She smiled wearily. Feels like we've just opened a bigger wound. He nodded. Maybe, but at least now, it's bleeding where people can see it. That night, Carla drove back to her small apartment, exhaustion settling into her bones. She parked, turned off the engine, and froze. A dark SUV sat across the street. Engine running. Headlights off. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. For a long moment, neither she nor the car moved. Then, slowly, it pulled away, disappearing into the snow. Carla exhaled shakily, her reflection in the window, pale and tired. She whispered to herself, "Truth doesn't sleep." In the distance, church bells rang midnight, low and haunting. And though the world outside was still and quiet, somewhere in the dark, forces were shifting again. The truth had woken something powerful, and it wasn't done with her yet. The wind howled through the streets of Cleveland like a warning. Carla Jennings stood by her apartment window, watching the snowfall blur the city lights. She hadn't slept much since the congressional hearing. The nation was watching now. Her face splashed across every headline, every news feed. But behind the cameras, she felt the walls closing in. Her phone vibrated on the counter. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but you don't know what you've started." No signature. No number traceable. Carla's pulse quickened. She locked her doors, double-checked the windows, and sat down with a shaking breath. She'd always believed that truth protected those who sought it. But lately, it felt more like a target painted on her back. Across town, Ethan Cole had started keeping a gun in his glove compartment, something he never imagined he'd do again. The DOJ task force had been receiving threats, and 2 witnesses had already recanted their statements. Fear was spreading like smoke. He was heading home from the shelter when he saw a black SUV in his rearview mirror. It had been following him for 6 blocks. He turned right. It turned right. He took another turn fast. The SUV stayed behind. Ethan's knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. He slowed at a red light, heart pounding, and then, without warning, the SUV sped past him and disappeared into the dark. He exhaled shakily, his chest tight. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe the shadows were getting bolder. The next morning, Carla met with Agent Rivera in a cramped conference room filled with file boxes and stale coffee. Rivera's eyes were bloodshot. "We've got a problem," he said. "Someone inside is leaking information. Our suspects are always one step ahead." Carla frowned. "You think someone in the DOJ is compromised?" He nodded grimly. "Or someone higher up." He handed her a folder. Inside was a list of sealed documents, heavily redacted. One name, though, was clear: Chief Gregory Stanton, head of the State Police Union. Carla's stomach sank. "He's untouchable." "Not anymore," Rivera said. "We have evidence Stanton coordinated with Crane and others to suppress misconduct investigations. But if we move on him too soon, we'll lose everything." Carla studied the file. "Then we don't move on him." "Not yet. We make him move first." That evening, Carla went to visit Catherine Adams, Lily's mother, for the first time in months. Catherine's modest home sat at the edge of town, surrounded by trees heavy with snow. When Carla knocked, it took a while for Catherine to answer. She looked thinner, more worn. "They've been around again," she said before Carla could speak. "Unmarked cars. Same ones as before. Did you call anyone?" Catherine shook her head. "Who would I call? The police? They're the ones scaring me." Carla stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Lily sat on the floor, coloring in a picture book, humming softly. "Hi, sweet girl," Carla said gently. Lily looked up and smiled. "You came back." Carla smiled faintly. "Of course." Catherine poured tea, her hands trembling slightly. "I saw the hearing. You were brave, Carla, but you've made enemies." Carla stared into her cup. "It's worth it if it stops this from happening again." Catherine's voice softened. "I used to think the same. But truth doesn't always save people. Sometimes it ruins them first. 2 days later, Rivera called her at dawn. "We got Stanton," he said, excitement and caution mingling in his tone. "He's agreed to a meeting. Private. Says he wants to talk before this goes federal." "Why me?" "He asked for you specifically." Carla hesitated. Every instinct told her this was wrong. But if Stanton was willing to talk, it could be the break they needed. "Where?" she asked. "Abandoned train depot. East Side, noon." Carla laughed bitterly. "Sounds safe. Bring someone you trust," Rivera said. "Just in case." By noon, the sky was dark with snow clouds. The depot loomed in silence, a decaying skeleton of steel and brick. Carla parked her car and glanced at her passenger, Ethan. He insisted on coming. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But sometimes the only way out is through." They stepped inside. Footsteps echoed on concrete. Chief Stanton stood near the old loading platform, dressed in a heavy coat, flanked by 2 men in plain clothes. "Ms. Jennings," Stanton greeted with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've caused quite a storm." "I'm not the one who broke the law," she replied. "Law," he said, chuckling. "That's a funny word. You think this is about right and wrong? This is about balance. You take down Crane, the whole foundation shakes. You bring me down, it collapses." "Maybe it should," she said. Stanton's smile faded. "You're idealistic. That's dangerous. People like you think you can clean the system. But the system is the dirt. It keeps the machine running." Ethan stepped forward. "You framed innocent people to keep the machine running? You call that justice?" Stanton ignored him. "You're in over your head, Jennings. Back off. Publish your book, take your fame, and walk away. Or you'll end up like the others who didn't." Carla's eyes narrowed. Was that a threat? He leaned closer. "No, a forecast." That night, Carla's apartment caught fire. She woke to the shriek of her smoke alarm and the smell of burning plastic. Flames licked up the living room curtains, thick black smoke pouring toward the ceiling. Coughing, she grabbed her phone and stumbled to the door, but the hallway was already engulfed. She dropped low, crawling toward the fire escape. Her lungs burned as she climbed through the window, barefoot in the snow. By the time the fire department arrived, half the building was gone. Rivera showed up minutes later, jaw tight. "You think it was an accident?" Carla didn't answer. She just stared at the flames devouring everything she'd built. News of the fire spread fast. The media called it suspicious, though no one dared say the word targeted. Ethan found her at the station later that day, sitting on a bench with a blanket around her shoulders. "They won't stop," he said quietly. Carla's eyes were distant. "Then neither will we." The DOJ moved quickly. Within days, Rivera secured warrants for Stanton's financial records, and what they found was explosive. Shell companies, offshore accounts, bribes linked to dozens of fast-track prosecutions. Carla sat with Rivera as he spread the documents across the table. "This," he said, tapping one file, "is the thread that unravels it all." Carla exhaled slowly. "Then pull it." The arrests began at dawn. Police officers, lawyers, clerks, people who had seemed untouchable were suddenly in handcuffs. The city buzzed with disbelief. But Stanton was gone. His home empty. His accounts wiped clean. Carla stared at the empty office that night, the city lights glowing beyond the window. "He knew we were coming," she said. Rivera sighed. "He's running scared. That means we're close." But as she looked out over the snow-swept streets, Carla couldn't shake the feeling that the war was only beginning. Stanton wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was a gatekeeper to something much larger. And somewhere out there, he was waiting. For her, for the final move. That night, she returned to Catherine's house. Lily was asleep on the couch, clutching her stuffed dog. Carla tucked the child in gently. Catherine stood in the doorway, voice low. "You look tired." "I am," Carla admitted. "But I can't stop. Not now." Catherine nodded. "Then promise me something. When this is over, if it ever is, don't lose yourself in their fight." Carla looked down at Lily. "I'll try." But deep down, she knew the truth. Once you challenge the system, you don't walk away unchanged. The snow fell heavier outside, muffling the world in silence. Somewhere, far off, a phone rang unanswered, in a hotel room under Stanton's name. And as the city slept, one final storm began to gather on the horizon. The city of Cleveland awoke to headlines that crackled like fire. Police corruption scandal expands. Chief Stanton missing, DOJ issues nationwide alert. Carla Jennings stood on the courthouse steps that morning, her breath turning to fog in the biting wind. Cameras flashed, microphones reached for her, but she said nothing. She had spent months fighting for justice, tearing through layers of lies, but this was different. This time, the monster was still out there, and he was hunting back. Inside, the DOJ task force swarmed. Maps, documents, phone logs. Stanton's name circled in red on every wall. Rivera was at the center of it, running on caffeine and rage. "He's using old union connections," he told her. "We've tracked wire transfers to a network in Chicago. He's not just running, he's reorganizing." Carla frowned. Reorganizing for what? Rivera hesitated. "To bury us." Later that day, Carla met Ethan at a diner off the interstate. The place was quiet, except for the hum of the neon sign flickering in the window. He slid a file across the table. "I got something from an old contact in the press. Stanton's been in touch with someone inside the state government. A senator." Carla flipped the pages. The name made her blood run cold. Senator Raymond Holt. He'd been one of the loudest voices condemning her in the media, calling her a grandstanding opportunist out to dismantle law enforcement. "He's helping Stanton?" she asked. "More like protecting him," Ethan said. Holt's campaign was funded by the same police union slush accounts Stanton controlled. If Holt goes down, half the political system in this state burns with him. Carla leaned back, rubbing her temples. "Then we have to make it public before they silence us." Ethan nodded. "I already called Rivera. He's prepping a press conference. We go live tomorrow. Everything we have unfiltered." She looked out the window at the falling snow. "Tomorrow," she repeated softly. One more day of truth. That night, Carla couldn't sleep. The fire, the threats, the faces of the people she'd fought for, they all swirled in her mind. She walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and began typing. A statement, plain and raw. Not for lawyers or journalists. For the people. The system cannot correct itself when it protects its own corruption. Justice is not a luxury. It's the debt we owe to the truth. She stopped, stared at the words, and whispered, "Please let this be enough." The next morning, the courthouse plaza was a storm of reporters. The DOJ press conference had drawn a crowd larger than anyone expected. Carla stood beside Rivera, a sea of cameras in front of them. Ethan was in the crowd, watching. Rivera stepped up to the podium first. Over the past 6 months, this task force has uncovered systemic corruption within state and local law enforcement, involving falsified evidence, intimidation, and bribery. Today, we name those responsible. He listed names, one by one, officers, prosecutors, officials. The crowd murmured, jaws dropped. Then Rivera nodded to Carla. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Justice," she began, her voice echoing across the plaza, does not belong to those who enforce the law. It belongs to those who live under it. When the people sworn to protect us abuse that power, we have a duty to fight back, even when the cost is everything. Flashes burst. She continued. Chief Gregory Stanton, once a symbol of authority, orchestrated a network that silenced victims and rewarded corruption. He is not a lone wolf. He is the product of a culture that values conviction rates over truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Carla's gaze hardened. We're done being afraid. The applause started slow, one voice, then another, until the plaza thundered with sound. But amid the cheers, a chill ran through her. Rivera's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face draining of color. What is it? Carla asked. He showed her the screen. Anonymous tip. He's here. Moments later, chaos erupted. A loud crack split the air. A gunshot. People screamed. Security scrambled. Carla ducked behind the podium as Rivera shouted orders. A figure in a dark coat pushed through the crowd, running fast. Stanton! Rivera yelled. Carla saw him, older, thinner, but unmistakable. His face was twisted in fury and desperation. In his hand was a pistol. You think you can destroy me? He bellowed. You think you can erase what I built? Rivera and two agents moved to intercept, weapons drawn. Drop it! Rivera barked. Stanton's eyes locked on Carla. You don't understand, Jennings. I am the system. A gunshot echoed, then another. Stanton staggered, clutching his chest. He fell to the pavement, blood blooming across the snow. The plaza went silent. Carla stared, frozen, as agents swarmed around. Rivera lowered his gun slowly, breathing hard. It's over, he said. But Carla didn't answer. She just looked at Stanton's body, the man who had haunted every corner of her life for a year, and felt nothing, no victory, just exhaustion. Hours later, the news was everywhere. Chief Stanton killed in courthouse shooting. Corruption scandal ends in tragedy. But Carla knew it wasn't truly over. Corruption didn't die with one man. It simply shifted, found new faces. That night, she sat with Ethan at the edge of the frozen river. The air smelled like iron and smoke. Do you ever think we actually win? He asked quietly. Carla smiled faintly. Winning isn't the point. Telling the truth is. He nodded. Lily and Catherine are safe. I talked to them this morning. They're moving out of state, starting over. Carla's eyes softened. Good, they deserve peace. So do you, he said. She looked at the dark water, her reflection rippling. Maybe someday. Months passed. Investigations spread across other states. Carla's name appeared in history books and documentaries. Ethan published a memoir that became a symbol of hope for the wrongfully accused. But Carla withdrew from the spotlight. She took a job teaching law at a small university, far from the noise. One afternoon, she walked across the campus quad, snow crunching under her boots. A little girl ran past her, laughing, a golden retriever puppy chasing after her. For a moment, Carla froze. The image hit her like lightning. Lily, the courtroom, the police dog, the moment everything began. The little girl turned and waved. Hi, Carla smiled. Hi there. The child giggled and ran back to her mother, who scooped her up with a laugh. Carla stood there for a long time, watching them disappear down the path. The past didn't vanish. It echoed, reshaped, found new meaning. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her original statement from the press conference. She read the final line again. Truth doesn't sleep. It waits. The wind caught the paper, lifting it from her hand. She let it go, watching it flutter into the gray sky until it vanished completely. A peace she hadn't felt in years washed over her. Not triumph, but release. As she turned to leave, the church bells in the distance began to ring, slow and solemn. Carla Jennings walked away from the snow, from the ghosts, from the fire, not to forget, but to begin again. Because truth, once awakened, never truly dies. It lives on in those brave enough to chase it. And somewhere in the quiet heart of America, a little girl once pointed at a police dog and unknowingly started a revolution.